Welcome to the Claire and Horatio Daily World Brief, available at claireandhoratio.com. Imagine bringing your family car to a complete halt at a checkpoint.
You raise your hands to clearly show you are unarmed, and a soldier standing just 10 meters away fires a rifle directly through your front windshield without a single warning shot.
The official military report will later classify this fatal encounter as a mistaken perception of an accelerating vehicle. Today is Sunday, June 7, 2026, and we are starting in the occupied West Bank to look at the brutal human reality of a severe breakdown in military rules of engagement.
Mourners in Hebron have just buried a 7-month-old baby named Sam Fad Abu Haikal. He was shot in the head by an Israeli soldier while strapped into his car seat at a checkpoint in Tel Rameda.
The official statement from the Israel Defense Forces claims their soldiers fired a single shot after they perceived a vehicle accelerating towards them. The physical evidence, along with multiple eyewitness accounts, completely dismantles that narrative.
The grandmother, Varial, stated the family stopped the car immediately when they saw soldiers approaching from a side road. The father, Fad, raised his hands. The spatial reality of this event is critical. A soldier was standing a mere 10 meters away.
At that distance, the difference between a stationary vehicle with a driver holding his hands up and an accelerating threat is not ambiguous. The IDF subsequently issued a statement acknowledging the family were, quote, uninvolved civilians and expressed deep sorrow.
The physical trajectory of the gunfire exposes a catastrophic failure of discipline regardless of the apology. Fad pointed out that the bullet penetrated the front windshield, passed entirely through his own arm, and then struck his infant son in the head and his wife in the face.
His response to the military's explanation cut straight through the bureaucratic language. He said, when more than one bullet is fired, when there's no warning shot and no warning at all, it can't be a mistake.
Tel Rameda operates under a dense military presence designed to protect Israeli settlers living among Palestinian residents. Since the October 2023 attacks, the West Bank has experienced severe, sustained violence resulting in over 1,000 Palestinians and at least 44 Israelis killed.
If you consider the breakdown of target identification at a static checkpoint, where a soldier has visual clarity from 10 meters away, the implications for rapid, fluid military operations are deeply alarming. That exact question of systemic failure scales up terrifyingly when you look at how the IDF is operating from the air in sovereign Lebanon.
Near the village of Kfar Tebnit, an Israeli strike completely destroyed a vehicle, killing 3 Lebanese soldiers: Brigadier General Samer Sabra, Captain Eli Khoury, and Private Hassan Ghazal.
The military classification of this airstrike mirrors the language used in Hebron almost word for word. The IDF claimed the vehicle was moving suspiciously in an active combat zone.
The geopolitical bind here is acute. Israel has been engaged in heavy fighting with Hezbollah in southern Lebanon since the March 2 escalation. Israel is not legally at war with the Lebanese government.
The Lebanese armed forces are theoretically the only entity capable of securing a lasting ceasefire. The government in Beirut desperately wants to end the fighting so their national army can fulfill the international mandate to disarm Hezbollah themselves.
That task becomes physically impossible if their commanding officers are being eliminated by Israeli airstrikes. It is essentially demanding that a local fire department put out a raging blaze while you actively drop explosives on their fire engines.
Over the weekend alone, the IDF struck roughly 150 Hezbollah infrastructure sites in southern Lebanon. The Lebanese army reacted with fury to the strike on their personnel, categorizing it as brutal, deliberate, and repeated aggression.
Lebanese President Joseph Aoun explicitly stated his country is fed up with the conflict, placing the blame for the broader regional fire squarely on Iran. The Iranian foreign minister dismissively told Aoun to save Lebanon from its real foe, pointing the finger back at Israel.
The diplomatic and economic fallout from that initial March 2 Middle East escalation is actively fracturing European politics, particularly the crucial alliance between Germany and the United States. Today marks exactly 100 days since the U.S. and Israel initiated their attack on Iran on February 28.
That operation resulted in the death of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz initially navigated that attack by refusing to classify it as a violation of international law.
He clearly calculated that shielding Washington would build political capital with the new Trump administration. Merz went on record labeling the Iranian government a terrorist regime and asserted the U.S. and Israel had good reasons for the strikes.
That selective application of international law drew immediate domestic fire. Henning Hoff of the German Council on Foreign Relations criticized the chancellor for invoking international norms forcefully against Russia while ignoring them entirely in the Middle East.
Leo Reisner of the Left Party accused Merz of allowing himself to be paraded as Trump's sidekick. The timeline of Merz's subsequent political whiplash is pure survival mode, entirely driven by physics and economics.
The closure of the Strait of Hormuz following those strikes caused global oil and gas prices to spike sharply. When energy prices jump, a manufacturing-heavy economy like Germany chokes.
Factories face exorbitant operating costs, consumer prices inflate, and public anger calcifies. Merz's public approval plummeted, creating the exact conditions for the right-wing Alternative for Germany, or AfD, to surge past his Christian Democratic Union in recent polls.
Economic suffocation translated instantly into a domestic political crisis. Facing the potential collapse of his government, Merz executed an abrupt reversal in late April.
He suddenly accused Washington of lacking a convincing strategy and suggested the U.S. was being humiliated by Iran's leadership. Political scientist Johannes Warwick pointed out that this shift followed increasingly extreme rhetoric from President Trump.
Trump had started casually discussing wiping Iran off the face of the earth. You can practically see Berlin realizing the blank check they handed Washington was about to bounce.
Retaliation from the White House was swift, punitive, and structural. President Trump took to Truth Social to announce Germany was doing poorly economically and otherwise.
He followed that post by ordering the withdrawal of 5,000 U.S. troops from German soil. Furthermore, he canceled the planned deployment of Tomahawk cruise missiles, which were intended as a defensive deterrent against Russia, and reinstated aggressive tariffs on European Union car exports.
Berlin's current damage control efforts border on desperation. Merz is offering a German minesweeper for a future naval mission in the Strait of Hormuz once hostilities conclude.
It is a purely conciliatory gesture toward a U.S. administration that has already moved on to punishing them. The trust among the German electorate is entirely shattered.
Recent polling indicates 58% of Germans view the military action taken by the U.S. and Israel as unjustified. A staggering low of only 15% view the United States as a reliable partner.
While European leaders attempt to manage a buckling transatlantic alliance and military volatility in the Middle East, they are simultaneously confronting an intensifying borderless war on their own eastern front. The Russian city of St. Petersburg has just sustained a massive drone barrage.
This operation was deliberately timed to disrupt the conclusion of Vladimir Putin's International Economic Forum right in his own hometown. Regional authorities documented an unprecedented 141 drones intercepted in the Leningrad region alone.
The Russian Defense Ministry claimed a total of 376 Ukrainian drones targeted regions across the Russian Federation, stretching from Belgorod all the way to the Black Sea.
The Ukrainian Security Service confirmed a direct strike on the Baltic Fleet base at Kronstadt in the Gulf of Finland. This caused a massive fire and forced 600 people to evacuate their homes in the coastal town of Bolshaya Ishora.
The strategic intent behind bringing the conflict to St. Petersburg goes beyond simple military destruction. It is a psychological and economic message.
Putin just rejected an open letter from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, which proposed face-to-face negotiations in a neutral country. Putin claimed he saw no point in such talks.
Zelensky publicly framed these drone strikes as a just response. He is calculating that if the Russian ruler insists on prolonging the war, the Russian populace and domestic economy will be forced to absorb the physical consequences.
Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andrei Sybiha reinforced this posture, warning that the failures for Russia will only become more humiliating. He stated plainly that there are no safe places in Russia that are exempt from long-range Ukrainian attacks. For more daily briefings, brain candy explainers, and classic audiobooks, visit clairenaratio.com.
With diplomacy completely paralyzed, Northern Europe is rapidly militarizing its borders. NATO has officially stood up its Forward Land Forces Rapid Reaction Unit in Finland, securing a critical stretch of the Baltic Sea against the Russian fleet.
President Zelensky is traveling to London today, Sunday, to hold meetings with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, French President Emmanuel Macron, and Chancellor Merz. Their core objective is to solidify the 35-nation European coalition and sustain military support for Kyiv.
The unspoken urgency behind this meeting is the realization that Europe must build a security architecture that does not rely on unpredictable commitments from Washington. European leaders aren't just facing physical military threats from the East and unreliability from the West.
They are navigating a direct, manufactured ideological assault from the Trump administration. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth used his D-Day anniversary speech in Normandy, France, to explicitly accuse European nations of allowing an invasion of migrants onto their shores.
Hegseth stood on the exact beaches where Allied forces fought 82 years ago and stated, sadly, today, different European beaches are stormed by different dangerous ideologies. Beaches in Spain, in Italy, in Greece and Bulgaria. Boats and men arrive. When will European capitals do something about that invasion?
He argued that the freedom restored in 1944 was merely temporary if current leaders failed to maintain it against modern migration. This rhetoric is not an isolated speech.
It is a highly coordinated narrative stemming directly from the administration's December national security strategy. That official document explicitly warned that Europe's economic issues are eclipsed by the stark prospect of civilizational erasure.
Vice President J.D. Vance amplified this framing on Friday. He blamed the fatal stabbing of 18-year-old British student Henry Nowak on a mass invasion of migrants, demanding that the only response is righteous anger.
When high-level officials deploy martial terms like invasion to describe human migration, it inflicts immense civic damage, particularly when the rhetoric aggressively contradicts basic data.
The U.S. administration is essentially projecting its own domestic obsessions onto European politics. It is akin to watching a neighbor whose house is on fire screaming at you because your lawn isn't perfectly manicured.
The Crown Prosecution Service confirmed the suspect in that UK stabbing, Vikram Digwa, was born British. Furthermore, the broader border data dismantles the panic driving this narrative.
Between January 1st and June 3rd of this year, 2026, the number of people crossing the English Channel by small boat actually dropped by 38% compared to the same period last year. Sea arrivals into mainland Europe peaked over a decade ago in 2015.
Domestically, the Trump administration has made anti-immigration policy the absolute center of its agenda, with ICE agents making thousands of arrests since January 2025. Exporting this rhetoric to Europe serves to embolden far-right factions overseas while creating a persistent atmosphere of emergency.
The weaponization of law and order rhetoric by politicians in the West contrasts violently with the reality in Latin America. The state's actual failure to provide basic physical security is a daily, life-or-death reality driving voters to the polls today.
If you look at Peru's Sunday presidential election, the electorate is responding to a horrifying epidemic of violent extortion. It has entirely paralyzed daily life and legitimate commerce.
The statistics obscure the sheer terror of navigating a working-class existence in Lima right now. Consider the reality of a bus driver named Tonio.
His local transit company received a message from a criminal gang demanding a $15,000 extortion payment, explicitly threatening to murder their drivers if the money wasn't delivered. Tonio was subsequently shot in the legs and abdomen.
He survived, returned to his route after 4 months of recovery, but his industry is bleeding out. Peru recorded nearly 30,000 extortion incidents in 2025 alone, and 239 drivers were killed last year for simply operating a bus.
Eiffel Kaya, the head of security at Tonio's bus depot, reported that 5 drivers from their specific company have been attacked. 1 was killed, and another was left in a vegetative state.
Put yourself in the shoes of a voter in Lima facing this level of urban terror. You were presented with 2 drastically different approaches to this security crisis, neither of which inspires institutional confidence.
Right-wing candidate Keiko Fujimori is promising a total military crackdown on organized crime. She pledges to control the prisons and block extorted money at financial institutions.
She is openly invoking the heavy-handed legacy of her father, former President Alberto Fujimori, who stabilized the economy in the 1990s but was ultimately jailed for severe human rights abuses.
Her supporters point to the current lawlessness as absolute justification for suspending civil liberties. A voter named Piero described Peru as overflowing with crime, arguing that a brutal, authoritarian approach is the only remaining option to restore order.
Her opponent, left-wing candidate Roberto Sanchez, proposes a sweeping expansion of the state to address the massive wealth inequality that breeds this desperation. He wants to aggressively review mining contracts, raise the minimum wage, and increase state control over natural resources to fund public health and education.
Peru is a major global exporter of critical minerals like copper, and his proposals have deeply terrified international financial markets. The mechanism of Peru's institutional failure is fascinating and tragic.
Despite churning through 8 presidents in 10 years, the country has maintained relative macroeconomic stability. It is a macroeconomic engine running inside a civic vacuum.
The vast wealth generated from raw material extraction simply never reaches the rural communities where that extraction takes place. A supporter named Maria Elena Linares defended Sanchez's plans, stating, "Don't believe this negative idea that communism throws out foreign investors. Our raw material, our gold, Our copper goes to other countries, and we are experiencing misery.
The institutional paralysis preventing any solution is staggering. José Luis Pérez Guadalupe, a former interior minister, highlighted the administrative volatility by noting the country has burned through 24 justice ministers and 32 interior ministers in a single decade.
How can a state dismantle organized extortion rings when the head of the police force changes every few months? Consuelo, a 21-year-old university student, summarized the profound exhaustion of the electorate.
She called the election a hopeless choice. She expressed the deep, paralyzing fear among young voters that a return to Fujimorism simply means trading the terror of the cartels for the terror of an authoritarian state.
If we look across the developments we've covered today, it is important to explicitly note that these stories do not share a neat, unified theme. We are observing distinct, severe global pressures moving in entirely different directions.
We see military escalation completely defying diplomatic control in both the Middle East and Ukraine. We are watching transatlantic alliances fracture along stark, manufactured ideological lines.
Simultaneously, we see internal civic exhaustion paralyzing democracies like Peru.
It leaves you with a deeply unsettling question to ponder today. What happens to a society when public trust in fundamental protections entirely evaporates?
And the consequences are terrifyingly clear, whether it is a highly trained army systematically failing to identify its targets at 10 meters, a global superpower abandoning its defense promises over volatile political grievances, or a state that can no longer guarantee a bus driver will survive his morning route.
Thank you for joining us. For more daily briefings, brain candy explainers, and classic audiobooks, visit clarinhoratio.com.